The following is a description of how the English and Norman armies prepared for the Battle of Hastings, as told by the chronicler William of Malmesbury. The English passed the night without sleep, in drinking and singing, and in the morning proceeded without delay against the enemy, all on foot, armed with battle axes, and covering themselves in front by the juncture of their shields. They formed an impenetrable body, which would have secured their safety that day had not the Normans, by a feigned flight, induced them to open their ranks. On the other hand, the Normans passed the whole night in confessing their sins, and received the communion of the Lord's body in the morning. The infantry formed the vanguard, while their cavalry, divided into wings, was placed in the rear. The Duke declared aloud that God would favour his side. In 878, Alfred the Great triumphed over the Vikings at the Battle of Edington. The Vikings were led by a man named Guthrum, who ruled over East Anglia. After the battle, Guthrum converted to Christianity. During the battle, the Saxons marched forwards in a tight group, with their shields becoming a solid wall. This proved effective in holding off the Viking attacks, and then Alfred's men gradually seized control of the battlefield, cutting down the enemy in great numbers. This forced the Vikings into retreat. Alfred went in pursuit, which led to a fortnight-long siege, which ended with the desperate Vikings pleading for mercy and them handing over hostages to Alfred. Soon after, Guthrum converted to Christianity. The Battle of Towton, fought in 1106, was a decisive victory for Henry I over his brother Robert Curthose, as Henry seized control of Robert's Duchy of Normandy. Henry, Robert, and their other brother William were sons of William the Conqueror, who passed on the kingdom of England to William, who became William II. Robert received Normandy, and Henry only received money. However, Henry would not have that, and he bided his time, and eventually he took the crown of England in 1100 on the death of William II, but now he wanted Normandy as well. At Towton he was presented with the opportunity. The numbers of casualties in the battle were relatively low, but the key moment came when Robert was captured, which gave Henry the victory. Robert would be a prisoner for the rest of his long life, although his son would keep up the fight against Henry. One morning in 1141, King Stephen was preparing himself for the Battle of Lincoln. Stephen knew that this battle could prove crucial in deciding the future of his kingship. To ready himself for the monumental occasion, Stephen took Mass, but unfortunately for him, during the service there appeared to be two bad omens. Firstly, he offered a candle to the bishop, but the candle fell to pieces in his hands. And then immediately after, a cup containing the communion bread fell to the ground. These may seem like innocuous events to us today, but to Stephen in the 12th century, this would have appeared to have been a sign that God was not on his side. All the same, Stephen threw himself into the midst of the battle and fought bravely. However, this was not enough, and not only was Stephen defeated, but he was also captured by his enemies. Most people know about the Norman invasion of England in 1066, but did you know that there was a later French invasion in the early 13th century? The English nobles had grown fed up of King John, and they invited the French crown to invade to kick John off the throne. The French king at the time was Philip II, who had bested John on numerous occasions, and he encouraged his son, Prince Louis, to lead the expedition to take the crown. Louis obliged and invaded. However, King John died in 1216, after Louis's campaign had fallen into something of a quagmire. He was eventually defeated in 1217 at the Battle of Lincoln by the brilliant but aging William Marshal, who had saved the English throne time and again during his lifetime. In 1264, a royalist army led by Henry III was defeated at the Battle of Lewes by Simon de Montfort and his fellow barons. The king's son, Prince Edward, the future Edward I, did inflict some damage on de Montfort's army, but Edward's rather reckless pursuit of a part of the enemy's army that was fleeing the battle left his father vulnerable, and as a result of Edward's rashness, the barons would win the battle, as described by one chronicler. There the fiery valour of the barons was visibly displayed, who fought eagerly for their country, and at last gained the victory, for the King of England was taken prisoner, after a very fine horse had been killed under him, and Richard his brother, King of the Romans, was also taken prisoner, and many others were taken also. In 1314, at the Battle of Bannockburn, England and Edward II suffered a humiliating defeat at the hands of Robert the Bruce and the Scots. Here, from the life of Edward II, is an extract describing the embarrassing English retreat. Thus, while our people fled, following in the king's footsteps, lo, a certain ditch entrapped many of them, and a great part of our army perished in it. The king, coming to the castle, and thinking to find refuge there, was repulsed as if he were the enemy. The drawbridge was raised, and the gate closed. The retreat proved to be as farcical as the battle itself for the English. The English army had heavily outnumbered the Scots, but this made very little difference. Edward the Black Prince was born in 1330, the eldest son of King Edward III. His nickname is either derived from a suit of armour he used to wear as a young boy, or from his reputation as a ruthless warrior later in life. In 1346, at the age of just 16, Edward would play a crucial role in England's great victory at Crecy in the Hundred Years' War. A decade later, he would lead England to another great victory at Poitiers. Edward would continue to lead campaigns on the continent through the 1360s and early 1370s. However, a life of constant military campaigning took its toll, and he fell into bad health as the 1370s wore on. He died, aged just 45, in 1376. Early on the morning of the 25th of October, 1415, Henry V of England and his men were taking mass, placing their faith in divine guidance shortly before they were to fight the Battle of Agincourt. Help from above did seem to be manifesting itself to them. By pure good luck, Henry and his men, the previous night, had set themselves up in an advantageous position, with natural protection being offered to them from the rear and to the sides by thick woods. It had also rained heavily overnight, and this would cause the French army tremendous problems, with the heavy armour weighing them down. The description of what Henry wore on the morning of Agincourt is famous: shining armour and a crown atop his head. He also wore a surcoat bearing the coat of arms of England and France. Henry was ready for Agincourt, and it would prove to be one of the greatest moments in English history. The Wars of the Roses was a destructive civil war that broke out in England in the mid-1450s. Richard, Duke of York, had his eyes set on the crown of Henry VI. However, Richard was killed at the Battle of Wakefield at the end of 1460. The claims of the Yorkists then passed on to his son, Edward, Earl of March. Edward was a brilliant military leader, and he would end his career undefeated in battle. He defeated the Royalist army at the Battle of Towton in March of 1461. He was now Edward IV. Edward, though, would be deposed himself in 1470 by the unlikely alliance of Henry VI's Queen, Margaret of Anjou, and her hated enemy, Warwick the Kingmaker. Edward returned, though, in 1471, and he had Henry VI murdered at the Tower of London.